Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the comprehensive yet informal study of Kant's critique of pure reason. Um, Matt here, as usual. Although we have an unusual but very, very welcomed and wonderful way unusual. We have a lot of people today joining us. We have Kent, who's a fellow graduate student. Uh, of mine. We have Kirk, who's been here. Actually, yeah, Kirk has been here before. By the time you're seeing this on YouTube, and then, and then we have Harrison, who's also been here. So Kirk's here, Harrison's here, Kent is here. I'm
I've been
here.
here multiple times.
What's that?
I haven't just been here. I've been here for multiple times.
I know. But I'm doing this weird intro um, because we're going back. If you notice the date, if you're watching this in the order and the playlist, you probably noticed we're like fucking like many months later. Why are we doing this in July 2025 when like the last time we were doing this stuff was like February 2025? Because we skipped a section. We skipped a section somehow. Actually, two sections. We just this first analogy and then the second analogy. So, of the of experience that's in the systematic representation of all synthetic principles. Where we are like in real time outside of the playlist, if you're just like seeing this on like my YouTube page outside of the playlist, we're normally we're in like the transcendental dialectic section where we're in like the paralogism. That's how you say that word. We're in the paralogisms where we're talking about like dialectic, subjectivity, but we're taking a break and we're going back because we forgot this is a comprehensive study first and foremost, and we were in we I was uploading these to YouTube, doing the backlog of recordings, and we missed it. So my bad, our bad, but we're going back today. I'm excited though because I think especially now that we've like gone through a lot more of the book, going back, I think we'll understand a lot more. I've also taken a course. Kent was in it with me on Kant and Husserl, and we read through this part of the critique and like had like a seminar on it. And my professor James Dodd was very knowledgeable and allowed just increase my understanding of this text a lot. So I think this is going to be good. I think we're going to have a really good session here. I'm hoping that because especially I've been through this a few times now. I think we can hopefully just kind of fly through. But of course, if there are questions and discussions, we will let those happen, and we'll see where the time takes us. Um, if you have any questions, of course, and you're not here, let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to join this reading, let me know as well. Yeah. So that being said, we are in the first analogy. The principle of the persistence of substance. Yeah, so the analogies of experience are. Um, it's been a while since I've like summed it up. Basically, they're principles of the understanding that sort of govern our experience of the world, which is basically one of the most like brief ways I can put it. Um, we're going to see substance here. We're going to see causality and succession next, and then we're going to see. Well, actually, we've that actually picks up to where I stopped messing up the recordings, and we then the third analogy, which is simultaneity, which we've already covered. So, but if you're watching this in order, you haven't seen that yet. But so those are going to be the three ones that we're going to see. So as we can see here, substance is about persisting over time. If you've been with Pat and I before, we brought up the example of Descartes' wax a few times in the study of this text. Um, that's probably the best thing I can point you to. There's like a wax, a can of wax, and it's solid, and then it changes, the state of matter, as we would say nowadays, but it melts basically, and it changes in form into liquid, and we're like, whoa, the candle's gone, but also it's not gone because that's still the candle. It's just a melted candle, but it's still the candle. It has this substance of a candle. So that's sort of the substance I think that we're going to be talking about here. So yeah, so those are my
But
preliminary remarks. If anybody has any more before we begin reading, now's the time. Let me hear
I was
it.
I was gonna say that here it's different it, from the wax example
Okay.
because it's it's not a an intuition from doubt, but a application of an intuition for a rule. And uh and this is like this section is the first time where the rule isn't really like bare, that it involves a certain kind of activity on our part that to me is like puzzling because it kind of blurs the line between a transcendental philosophy and an empirical philosophy, and at the same time I don't recognize the kind of empiricism that he's describing in the first two analogies in the empiricisms in philosophy today. So yeah, I that's kind of all I wanted to say at the beginning. Uh, I also wanted to say that there's the difference between the two sections that came before, the axioms of intuitions and the anticipations of perception, is that
Hmm.
those had to do with necessary intuitions, whereas the analogies have to deal with contingent intuitions, and that's where our application of rules doesn't quite reach its object. And so you get an interesting point where Kant is arguing the thesis of transcendental idealism and actually showing the possible metaphysics in his view based on that argument. So like we get like very close to an answer to his question of like how is metaphysics possible here, because finally we have the metaphysical things, substance and causality. Um,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because you could these are like you said, possibilities. They're not um, as necessary as what he was talking about before. Um, I'm trying to like
You
find an example of what, but that might be too much. I want to maybe
I'll just make a
what's that? Oh,
Well, no, I was mentioning you. You mentioned how it's different from the wax example. Could you elaborate on that further? Because I'm a little confused on how it's different from the wax example.
I think he was just. I mean, um, uh, what I understood was that the context is sort of different, and like the way in which it's being brought up, and like the sort of what it is. So basically, Descartes is arguing, um, like Ken said, from doubt, um, whereas Kant is arguing that this is like a rule of the understanding, um, sort of being applied to experience, whereas Descartes is sort of like operating from doubt and sort of like I think his substance. I haven't read the meditations in a bit, but um, in there it seems that Descartes is more so um, confused about coming up with an explanation based on like doubt and how like one thing can remain the same over time, whereas Kant is more so like asserting a rule within the context of the understanding, which, as we know, isn't is very limited in scope.
Um,
I
And I'll let
wait.
Ken
So is
go
he?
after
Is
that.
well, I don't know if Harrison wants to go next or.
yeah. I guess my only thing I was gonna say. So is it like? Is it more just that like Descartes is is kind of like thinking like, well, I don't like. It's like how the only way this could be possible is if this were the case, but like I'm still doubting. Like this is more of like I'm coming at this because it couldn't be any other way, or is it
I think
that?
I don't remember exactly. Maybe Kent would remember better. But
Yeah, that's actually like quite close to what's happening in the wax example. Is like just prior to the wax example, he's still trying to figure out the kind of attributes that he clearly has. Um, I should say that it's like an open question how nicely the way Descartes thinks about substance aligns with the way we're going to see Kant deal with substance. But I do think there's a difference for Kant because he is more interested in the actual formal character of judgment and how that is the limit of possibility rather than a skeptical meditation rather than a doubt. He thinks philosophy is like more the form of the judgment itself is more powerful than or better for having certainty and modesty about about the world than this the criteria of clarity and distinctness. Um,
at least when it comes to like phenomenal experience.
Okay.
yes, yes.
I see.
Okay. I just want to know if Karsten and Kant were done making their point.
I am. What do you think before we go to the text?
Well, I was just gonna say, I wanted to bring what I didn't. It wasn't direct. It was also I was gonna ask Matt specifically if he thought that Husserl was going into a similar problem that Descartes has with the wax argument with his study of phenomenology. Because it seemed because I mean I haven't read Husserl, but from the lectures I heard that his notion of epoch sounds similar to like Descartes' Descartes' like skeptical meditation. But I didn't know if Matt had something to say about that.
Oh God, that also might be a better question for Kent. I don't. I've only read the one Husserl text that we read in the Husserl Kant seminar, which is Experience and Judgment, and I think he does talk about APOC, but I was very like confused by that, and like it seemed our class was, and I think I don't know. Ken, do you remember? Because I'm like struggling to
I
like
mean
even find a way
that
to describe it, and then let alone
so we
compare it to Descartes. That's
the
kind of challenging
the
me.
epoche um is not a part of the analysis of experience and judgment. The text that Matt and I read this spring,
So,
it gets extremely complex with Husserl. Um, I guess the important like phenomenological difference compared to like what we're about to see in the analogies of experience is that and this is also kind of how the epoche is distinct from Cartesian meditation is that there is never a like you never descend back to the non-transcendental viewpoint, which is kind of what Kant wants to do with the analogies of experience. This is like there there Husserl gets like around metaphysical representation, whereas Kant, and you get this in the introduction, says that you can't ever get rid of metaphysics. Like it's a part of our lives fundamentally. So I guess that would be the difference. It makes Husserl sound kind of like out there, but I don't know. James is awesome, and I like hearing that dude talk about Husserl and Kant. So,
Yeah,
um,
I just asked this because I've heard people compare Husserl's epoch to a Cartesian way of looking at like the essence of things, but like yeah,
well, I guess like one thing they have a different view of the ego, and it's also very different than the kind of I that you get in Kant. Maybe yeah, maybe we can I say we can like put aside Descartes and Husserl and their methods and instead see if Kant is arguing correctly for these analogies. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, that sounds good. But these are interesting considerations and some nice like context to enter the reading into. So
For sure.
yeah, we can begin. Does anyone wanna read this? These are just the first two things. Then I guess we could look and see if there's anything interesting. These footnotes. But would anyone like to begin reading? I can also read if nobody wants to. Okay, I can kick us off.
Yeah,
Look,
where are you starting?
um, here we're we are here. The first analogy, principle of the persistence of substance, which has some things attached to it that we can check out. So,
Mhm.
all appearances contain that which persists substance. So just substance right now is just that which persists. So that's why I brought up the wax example. Just sort of just you know this idea of just persistence over time, over change. Um, so all appearances contain that which persists substance as the object itself, and that which can change as its mere determination, i.e., a way in which the object exists. Um, and then in the second edition, it's a little different. In all change of appearances, substance persists, and its quantum is neither increased nor diminished in nature, um, which is an interesting add-on. It doesn't really talk about increasing or decreasing here. Yeah, so not too crazy, but that's how we start. Does anybody have any like comments or anything, or should we keep going? Um,
Makes sense.
yeah, there's some stuff here. The following series of notes is entered. Here it must be shown that this proposition does not pertain to any other substances than those whose alteration is effected only through moving causes, and also consists only in movement, consequently, in alteration of relations. So this here we have like a restriction on what we're actually talking about here. So we're talking about um, the only substance we're talking about is those who are affected through moving causes. So it's we're not talking about any like sort of eternal object. It seems um, that is sort of isolated in its own like being. This is not like a at all a Spinoza substance. I mean, given just where we are in the critique, I think that's clear enough. But he like further clarifies here what he's talking about. Um, let's see. All arising and perishing is only the alteration of that which endures. The substance, and this does not arise or perish. Thus, the world also does not. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I guess his point here is that if you're talking about something changing, then there's like a thing you're talking about that is itself isn't changing. Otherwise, you'd be talking about something else. So, um, let's see. Change can only be perceived through that which persists in alteration. For the difference of the times in which things are can only be perceived in them as parts of one and the same time. All change is only the division of time. Hence, there must be something that exists throughout the entire time, since the whole is always the ground of the division. Here, substance is the substratum, and that which is changing is only the way in which this exists. Yeah, so this is like a very classic like rationalist argument, right? It's at least to my understanding, um, if you're talking about something changing, the ground of that is that thing that is changing. That's the what's calling the substratum, the ground. Um, so that seems pretty straightforward. Here, the proof must be
Is
so conducted that it applies only to substances as phenomena of our outer sense, consequently from space, which exists at all time along with its determination. Yeah, so we're not we're missing a closed quote, which is annoying because I thought this was going to be another. Oh wait, unless this is all a big. Yeah, I don't know why there's like a lack of a closed quotation and then it just I don't understand. Oh, no, 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 because that's a citation. It does close. Okay, I'm just a fool. Okay, good. So these are separate things. Okay. Um, anyway, yeah, this stuff is in space, right? He's talking about outer sense, because of course, uh, especially if you're in like a philosophy 101 class, something that might get brought up is like the substance of a person, right? It's like, oh, are you, who are you? Are you like this unchanging self? Like, what is like your substance? And you might be tempted to answer something like this, you know, at the beginning for something like yourself or a sense of self, inner sense, Kant would call it. But here he adds this clarification, right? It's phenomena of the outer sense, of things in space, um, determinations in space. So this is outer. These are like objects, right? Of our outer phenomenal experience. This is not something that can be applied inwardly. And I think he elaborates on why here. In space, all alteration is movement, for if there was something else in the relations, then in accordance with the concept of alteration, the subject would persist. Aha. Therefore, everything in space would also have to disappear at the same time. That's interesting. In space, alteration is movement, for if there was something else in the relations, then in accordance with the concept of alteration, the subject would persist.
These are just like his little metaphysical arguments that follow from the transcendental aesthetic
Yeah,
and
exactly, right? Of inner sense and outer
and
sense. Yep.
different imaginative ways of applying categories. Uh, it's I had a question about um, like, or I guess we can just keep going.
Sure. Um, yeah, let's see. If the substance persists while the accidents change, with the substance, if all accidents are taken away, is the empty substantial. Then what is it that persists? Now, everything that can be distinguished from that which changes in experience is quantity, and thus can only be assessed through the magnitude of the merely relative effect in the case of external relations, and therefore applies only to bodies. Um, I can't tell if this is like a rhetorical question. No, because then he says now everything that can be distinguished from that which changes in experience is quantity. Everything, the way Kant writes sometimes like trips me up. Now everything that can be distinguished from that which changes in experience. Everything can be distinguished from that which changes. Is quantity, and this can only be assessed through the magnitude of the merely relative. So is he just saying that quantity only applies to bodies because it's a relative?
I can have like a quantity of thoughts, right?
Um, hmm. Now, everything that can be distinguished from that which changes in experience is quantity. Why can quantity be distinguished from that which changes in experience? And can only be assessed through the magnitude of the merely relative effect in the case. Um, I mean, I guess Kant's answer would be because how are you quantifying the thought? Harrison, to answer your question. Sorry, I'm like going back and forth between trying to understand this and just because like well so like Ken said, this is stuff he's basing this on sort of implicitly through his arguments from the transcendental aesthetic, where quantity is a result. Actually, no, quantity can isn't
That's
that
time, right?
yeah from time. Yeah, that's from inner sense or the form of inner sense. So I don't understand. I don't understand this one. This is a question mark for me. Um, yeah, seriously. Let's get the soundboard up. I didn't do that.
Oh my God, I missed the sound.
We have like the um
Yeah.
yeah, I don't get that. Um why this externality? I don't know. That's weird. I'd imagine it's because I think maybe what he's like trying to say here is that we can't really measure the change of actually yeah, so this might go back to what I was responding to with Harrison, like how would you measure objectively, right? Because so keep in mind too, he's not just talking about quantity in general. We're in the analogies. So the analogies are supposed to be the like objective application of of the categories in experience. So I think Kant would say like how can you objectively quantify a thought? And that I think is not something you can do, at least under this like system that Kant is presented here. Does that make sense to like answer your question?
Would I be quantifying it in space? Like, would I be like, can I objectify a thought on like
Um,
in a linear one-dimensional space? Like to say that, like, for instance, I can say that, when I finish the sentence, that that's a thought, right? What allows me to do that?
yeah. So well.
Or is that
But notice how you're like notice how you're like qualifying like what counts as a thought, right? You're saying when I finish this sentence. So like a sentence is something I can like empirically, hear and like understand, and we can like you did exactly what Kant would say. How you do it is you use these applications of the understanding to to be able to what would the phrasing of this be? To be able to
and
to
we got
basically form an objective judgment about what is happening and how you might quantify it. And so like the sentence is happening um, in space, right? In some sort of like when somebody talks, that's like a noise, right? And they're like sound waves, right? And so um, I think
what if I limit it completely internally? Like, I'm not talking to someone, but I decide in my head this is one thought and this is another thought.
um, you can do that, but then that would lack the sort of like objective quantity that I think he's talking about here that applies to substance.
Yeah,
Um,
you wouldn't be determining a truth from a contingent situation if you just if you just took um, one if you just like in the succession of time notice that you're having more than one indeterminate succession. I mean, the fact that you do notice that is relevant to phenomenology, but I don't think Kant really sees each cognition as like a discrete um, means and end, um, and that it is also like, and that's also in some ways still autonomous from the kind of creatures we are that have these like pre-predicative descriptions. He wants to focus on the ways, again, judgments. It all comes back to judgments for
Yeah,
Kant.
objectively valid judgments of
Yeah,
experience. Um,
necessary unities.
yeah.
Uh,
Yes, and
I
that's
see.
in the case of you just pointing out a thought and like defining it for yourself. That's too, I think, subjective to.
Subjective. So would something objective be something that could be has to be experienced by more than one person? Or is that not
Um,
the case? Does it have to
no,
do with
well, it doesn't have to do with the
outstandings?
amount of people, although it should be able to be, I think, experienced by multiple people. But really,
I guess
it's more so, it's more so. That's actually what we're gonna get into, sort of what makes something. I mean, we've been in it a little bit already, but we're gonna get it more with these analogies. So maybe that would be a good like springboard to like keep going, and we can like elaborate and come back to that question as we read.
agree.
Because that's what this section actually is. That's what makes this section of the critique interesting, I think, and what a lot of the point is. So yeah, because yeah, we still got actual. I've just been in the footnotes because I'm really
in
like,
his like first edition notes.
yeah,
Yeah,
which
I
I
mean
think
a
are
lot of the
interesting, and I think they're good to consider because I don't.
yeah, they're I'm glad you read them. He does kind of say a lot of the same things in the following passages too.
Yeah, yeah, it's always
Um,
just yeah. I always just scout these out because I mean this is a comprehensive study as I advertise it on YouTube, and I also like just
yeah.
it's a good
So
excuse to
his
like really get intimate with the critique, you know, and really see like the context and what he's all the possible ways something could be understood. Because there have been points earlier in the study too where like I forget. Actually, I think it might be later in this. Actually, no, it was earlier, even in the playlist with where we are, like, and in the critique. Uh, um, um, what's the word? In order. Chronologically. Um, he was talking about the modi of time. He was talking about um, yeah, and then so I was like, what does he mean by these modi of time? And there was like a footnote that he had that like summarized it perfectly, and like the text was like way too convoluted. So
nice.
yeah. Anyway, that's why I
Shout out to Paul Geyer and Alan Wood
yes. Oh my God, I can't
putting
imagine
in
like
that work.
like this had to take like what like 5 to 10 years like minimum. Like
Yeah.
holy, you're probably like that's such a cool thing. That's like one of like the dream parts of like academia that would be it would just be like sitting in like an archive and like making an English translation of some like huge yeah I don't know it's anyway that's all yeah so anyway getting back
So
to this
are there any other ways to represent with time than like what he says in the first on the next page? All appearances are in time, in which, as substratum, as persistent form of inner intuition, both simultaneity as well as succession can alone be represented.
um so this is actually an interesting um point because um our Ken, you have yet to meet Pat, but Pat was here like a while ago in the study, and he brought up that the critique seems to be like explaining objectively valid experience as it is only under like certain conditions, I guess. I think we were talking about like I don't know, like psychedelic experiences and different experiences of things like time and space, and we're like, yeah, the critique doesn't really like account for it like at least in that way, even if some like the principles are there. Um, it kind of makes big universal claims that don't really count for like other sorts of like conscious experiences that like Kant probably wasn't even like aware of.
Yeah, I mean, a priori time is maybe a blander way to represent time than other ways that you could.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I I agree with all that.
Yeah. But I mean, insofar as you know, this experience is still something. I think it's also interesting.
Different times, I'm reading from the Transcendental Aesthetic. Different times are not simultaneous, but successive. Just as different spaces are not successive, but simultaneous. You can't be having two times at the same time.
Yep.
This is the time after that time before I was talking about time. We succeeded from one to the next. I mean, how are you guys feeling about substance right now? Is it apodictically certain?
What does apodictic mean?
You can't imagine that there's not a substance based on these arguments from the notes and the next couple of paragraphs.
Well, one thing you mentioned, what it says, all appearances are in time, in which as substratum, as persistent from inner intuition, both simultaneously as well as succession can alone be represented. What do you mean by both simultaneous? Like that seems like it doesn't make sense. Simultaneity and succession.
Well, he's saying that like these are the two ways in which we can, which is what Kent and I were like postulating if Kant
Oh,
is correct on
okay,
this or not.
right.
Like
I
you can experience appearances like together in the same time, which is simultaneity, and then you can experience them in a succession, right? So one after the other. So like right now in like a one simultaneous moment, I'm like looking at my monitor, and also in my perceptive view is my microphone, right? But then if I take like 2 seconds to turn my head, then there's a succession, right? There's the microphone, the monitor, and then like the door behind me, right, in my room. So that's a successive like set of appearances, I guess you could say. Um, does that make
is
sense?
the question. Yeah, is the question? Am I convinced that I can't not imagine a substratum? Um,
Well, that was the substance question. We were before that we were debating um, can we are these the only possible ways to like experience time? Um, which according to some people's like I mean I brought up like psychedelic experiences, but like I don't know, there are probably other things and other ways of like defining time, like Kent was saying as well, um, that you could do it differently, which is
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
And actually some stuff I think in the transcendental schema and how judgment works is quite interesting, and there's a whole third critique dedicated to that, and I think that might touch on that maybe a bit more. um, but yeah, and then the
There's
other
that.
thing is like, yeah, is substance uh, you know apodictically certain to be how Kant saying it is. Um, if we want to answer that question, maybe with some more detail, we could continue reading if you guys want to do that. Um,
Yeah, I'm down.
does anyone want to read this chunk here, this paragraph? This
I'll read.
cool. Thanks.
Um, yeah. All appearances are in time, in which, as substratum, as persistent form of inner intuition, both simultaneity as well as succession can alone be represented. Time, therefore, in which all change of appearances is to be thought, lasts and does not change, since it is that in which succession or simultaneity can be represented only as determinations of it. Now, time cannot be perceived by itself. Consequently, it is in the objects of perception, i.e., the appearances, that the substratum must be encountered that represents time in general, and in which all change or simultaneity can be perceived in apprehension through the relation of the appearances to it. However, the substratum of everything real, i.e., everything that belongs to the existence of things, is substance, of which everything that belongs to existence can be thought only as determination. Consequently, that which persists in relation to which alone and all temporal relations of appearance can be determined, the substance in the appearance, i.e., the real in the appearance, which, as the substratum of change, always remains the same. Since this therefore cannot change in existence, its quantum in nature can also be neither increased nor diminished.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, that's Kant's more extended take on substance. It's this um, yeah, it's just it's that which belongs to the existence of things, but it's only a determination, right? It's obviously not something empirical, right? I mean, obviously, it wouldn't be in this section if it were, but it's this pure. Um, um, I don't call it a category because there are categories, and I don't. Uh, does anybody remember if the? Hang on, wait. The I just want to see what they are. Can't remember them all. Oh, substance is a category. Okay, it's a category of relation. Cool. Okay. Um, yeah. Okay. So it is a category. I'm correct in saying that, even in the Kantian sense. Okay. Yeah. So oh, which makes sense, duh, because these are the applications of the categories in objective experience. So okay. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a logical category, right? That belongs to the existence of something over time. Time is not something we can perceive itself, but we see it as things change. But the substratum of those things is substance, which, as he says, it can't change, at least in quantity, um, because it's just sort of a thing that exists, right? It's either it does or it doesn't. Um, it's sort of like a binary thing, I think.
If yeah, like if time were different, maybe this substratum would be described in a different way. But time as it is, uh, substance just like appears.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. It just comes onto the scene, as Hegel would say. Well, I don't know Hegel
How
makes
does
argument, but in
how,
Hegelian like verbiage, it's like it comes onto the scene. You just you're in the succession of time, or you're in like a moment in time. Which also, by the way, actually, if we're bringing in Hegel, that's like this is not clear. This is actually like the beginning of phenomenology. Is like this shit is weird, yo. This is now, and now is then, and yeah, it's cool.
I mean,
Mhm.
I think for Kant, the it's not even like coming onto the scene. Like, yeah, maybe there's a history of a subject that doesn't have a clear idea of substance and its relation to time, and then gets it. Like that might be true in the history of an individual, but he's talking about just like whenever you want to reason,
Oh
like
no, that's
it's
not. Yeah,
there.
that's not what I
Yeah,
meant. Sorry, I was talking
it's
about
like
like different like the substance of a specific like object would in your like experience in the flow of time of Kantian time would just things sort of like you said appear, right? That's what I meant, like come onto the scene, like things come onto the scene, right? That's just in our like I said, I turn my head and oh, a door, that's the substance,
mhm.
that seems to be at least what's happening on my reading. Um, um,
Change. Yeah,
or at least your
well, kind
awareness of it. That's something because uh, something that I think is sort of like an implicit critique of Berkeley, um, and his like account for and the classic philosophical question people like to ask, like the pop philosophy. Does the tree make a noise what is it? It's like if nobody's around to hear a tree fall, does it make a noise? Yeah, Kant has an answer to that in his stuff on like simultaneous existence of multiple things, which is really cool. And that we've already covered that, so that's already on YouTube at the time of this recording. So check that out if that interests you. But anyway, Kant's just laying the groundwork for that here, saying like, yeah, things just as time flows, substance. Um,
Can I read like a good chunk here, and then
sure,
like
yeah,
stop
yeah,
me if you want to say anything.
yeah.
All right.
Of something like we
Our
already read.
just moving on from A182 on.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. We can move on. Yep, for sure.
Um, our apprehension of the manifold of appearance is always successive and therefore always changing. We can therefore never determine from this alone whether this manifold, as object of experience, is simultaneous or successive. If something does not ground it, which always exists, that is, something lasting and persisting, of which all change and simultaneity are nothing but so many ways, modi of time, in which that which persists exists. Oh God, Kant. Only in that which persists, therefore, are temporal relations possible. For simultaneity and succession are the only relations in time. That is, that which persists is the substratum of the empirical representation of time itself, by which alone all time determination is possible.
Is this what you were talking about, where like it gets weird crossing over like the empiricism with the transcendental stuff?
Um, well, it it gets even we get even more of that soon, but uh,
Because I think this is interesting. He's saying like the only way a time determination is possible is if we have an empirical object to like you know um, what's the word, I guess. I mean, he just says that's the only way in which it's possible. But for
well,
us to
I mean, you see a shadow pointing one way, and then later you see it pointing the other way. An amount of time has passed.
yeah,
You wouldn't. Yeah. This is just like I'm getting back to like what puzzles me about this section is like is like what kind of empiricism is he arguing for right now, and that he'll continue to argue for in the refutation. Um, uh, I'll just keep going unless somebody has something to say about
I mean, yeah,
persistence.
my
I
my
feel like
my my immediate like answer is to say like um that time time is an a priori structure that allows an empirical object to be cognized, and then after that is cognized, that serves as the basis for a time determination. So it's almost like we're like transcendental, and then we're going to the level of empirical experience, and then we're like abstracting away again. That seems to be like what's happening here.
oh yeah. So he's bringing us empiricism by way of transcendental philosophy, uh, which is a lot different than the way that we get empiricism from, say, Hume or even like Oxford philosophers at like the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Um,
What now?
it's
What'd you say, Kirk?
So I heard something about Oxford philosophers. I don't know what that is.
yeah. So I guess this kind of like brings us to like a contemporary issue where empiricism is and like what counts as a conception of rationality about outer objects is like in a huge dispute right now. It's like one of the most confused realms in philosophy, uh, like at the moment, in my opinion. And it so it's either like a lot of it is goes through like analysis of language, like if two people can agree on something that's distinct from the inner sense, then that's what the substance is, and uh, there's no doubt about it. But here we see like 300 years ago, where it has nothing to do with two subjects or a conversation, but has everything to do with the limits of our sensibility. Um, and so and then that kind of like opens the question, well, like what kind of sensibilities can we have, whether in this like epistemological sense, or using the language, which is kind of how Oxford like is considered like one of the central places for philosophy in the past 150 years. So that was like an extremely fast gloss on that issue, but like Kant has anticipated it, and it makes sense that at the time everybody was like, "Bro, what are you talking about? Like, just just describe stuff, just categorize stuff, just be a dogmatist, but like be humble about it." And he's like, "No, like we these are the limits. These them's the breaks, basically." Um, but fortunately, that includes this like very intuitive thing that we have, which is like substance. It's like, uh, but he said, but it's, I guess, I mean, why is he reducing it to a temporal explanation? I guess maybe the two people agreeing or disagreeing about what is external is a fine way to consider objects. I don't know.
I think. Wait, sorry. Can you repeat the last question you had? I like totally
So
forgot what I was gonna
is
say.
is Kant's categorical, not like, don't think about it like with the categorical imperative, but like
Right,
his
right.
categorical, or sorry, uh, his taking reason to be the absolute condition, is that preferable to taking reason in a intersubjective setting where you have to like provide certain reasons in a debate context, or in a, I guess, like, I don't, yeah, I don't even, I kind of lost track of like how I was trying to phrase that question. Um, but I guess it always for me is like, what what is transcendental philosophy? Why do transcendental philosophy? Um, is this what that is? Uh,
So
anyway,
I think the I think the idea behind Kant's like project is to say like before you talk about something, check to see what like is even like possible to like talk about. I mean, obviously this isn't in the language of, but like bringing into this context of like of your like question of like intersubjective debate. It's like I think the place like transcendental philosophy serves there is to say like, and Kant talks about this as we go into the section called amphibly on reflection, which has actually been recorded. I have to upload that still, but basically Kant says there, it's like, yeah, you want to make sure that like what you're talking about is actually something that can be talked about given the principles of like what makes what you're talking about possible, so you can better understand what it is you're talking about in the context of like those greater principles. And I think what Kant is trying to do here, well, less so here, but maybe more back in these footnotes, is to like really, he's trying to do that. I think he's trying to say like, okay, yes, substance, but how did we even get to substance, right? Because it's a category, and categories are, you know, limited to the understanding, and then this specific category applies to space, right? Things in space, which obviously, you know, space being outer sense, secondary to inner sense, time, right? Or which is what I would call like the primary sense. It seems, at least that's how Kant paints it in the critique, I think, in time as well. So we're talking about things changing over time, in space, and that's to say how we could use the understanding in experience. I think it's also important to remember too that like these are like principles, right? So these aren't always used per se. At least that's how I understand like categories. But I think he's saying like if you were to like apply this category of substance, this is how it would be done. So anyway, that was like a spiel, but I don't know, Ken, does that like address anything you were you were saying?
Yeah, that helps.
I feel like we're in like a James seminar where it's just like the question and the answer sound like two entirely different things, but like somehow it like kind of helps.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's rare that you find something that is like both making an argument about substance and mind, uh, like right next to each other. But Kant is really concerned with getting that, I guess, reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, I think really what he's doing is he's saying if you were to like do something with substance, this is how it must be done. I think that's
Yeah,
what he's saying.
yeah, definitely.
And
You would need the principle.
yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Which yeah, exactly. Yep. And that obviously, like you said, is based on the aesthetic. So if you don't buy into the aesthetic, then this doesn't work, I think. Um,
and also, like, I guess we're gonna get to the point where like, they are called analogies. They're not called uh, con constituents of
Ooh, you know
experience.
what? This is actually
Uh,
a big topic that I like never actually understood. And Patrick and I, you'll probably meet Pat later on, Kent. But like, we were wondering why they're called like anticipations, axioms, analogies, and then is there like there's a last one, right? I'm forgetting, but
yeah,
like
well,
I don't understand that naming at all, and we were so lost. And then Pat was basically just like, I'm just gonna say these are all like principles and just go from there. And I'm like, okay, but we were confused at like at the specific like naming.
so actually, he covers it like in A 180 B 222 when he says, just like when he defines an analogy of experience, it will be a rule in accordance to which unity of experience is to arise from perceptions, not as a perception itself, as of it, empirical intuition in general. And as a principle, it will not be valid of the objects of appearance constitutively, but merely regulatively. So, like, that's why when you said that uh, you know what to do with substance when you have this principle, like, the reason why that made so much sense is because like finally these analogies are for doing. They are not for knowing. Um, and that also like puts into context the kind of back and forth between the the substance that terminates, like what we saw in those notes in the first edition, and a time that terminates versus one that's like he's kind of anticipating the antinomies too. But yeah, when I came back to this, I think I like the names actually really helped me understand the difference between a regulative, like what Kant is trying to do with the words constitutive and
Yeah,
regulative.
that was huge for us too. The only like in our study, I just thought that applied only to Oh, this is under analogies of experience.
Yeah,
Oh. Oh, wait. I thought the regulative constitutive thing was under Oh, okay,
I
wait.
think that's this
This is
might be one
clicking
of the
now.
first
This is clicking now.
mentions of it, like substantively, that like I don't know. It's taken me a really long time to understand what that distinction means, but this time around,
Oh, it's
it
huge. It's huge.
it
Yeah,
makes
exactly.
it makes more sense.
Yeah, it's exactly what you were saying. Okay, I just didn't know that that's like I never made that connection with that. I thought that was specifically about cuz he was talking about oh yeah, an analogy of experience. Yeah, wow, I just never made sense of the sentence, I guess. For some reason that never clicked. um yeah, I thought he was talking about something else, I guess, when
Yeah, it's weird. 'Cause, like, is because like it kind of seems to be like persistence would be constitutive, but I guess not.
no, no,
I
yeah,
know.
no, because theoretically you could well, Kant,
What's the
also,
difference?
Kant, this goes back to another fucking weird thing that I didn't really like ever fully get in Kant, like, and like didn't ever like fully agree with him either. Like, I think he thinks you can have like isolated space and time without like anything in it. It's a really weird view. Maybe not
I
ever
mean,
like
that's just like geometry, right? I mean
um
that's just like the use of the understanding abstracted from experience.
yeah, but the problem is that like how do you hypothesize like a geometrical thing without like any sort of like because to represent it at all you would have to use like some sort of like color or like sort of like these like Lockean qualities like color and like um I don't know, maybe color was the only one that Pat and I were like arguing
But
for.
it's also like heat. Um,
What about sound?
yeah, he doesn't really
I think
he
you
doesn't
could
talk about
represent
sound
a
enough.
geometrical figure without sound and without heat. I just don't think you could do it without like color.
Well, he's gonna. There will always be a like return to the senses in Kant. Like the
Oh yeah, yeah,
subjective
yeah, yeah. He said
is
that.
what it is to orient thinking.
Yeah, true. Okay, so I guess if you're taking it as purely like a principle, right, to orient thinking, that would.
Um,
Yeah. Well.
well, where were we?
Yeah. Yeah. This is. These are super interesting. We were. We were. We were here. We were
Oh,
at.
I think we're on the last sentence of that paragraph.
Yes. Right.
Um, For change does not affect time itself, but only the appearance in time, just as simultaneity is not a modus for time itself, in which no parts are simultaneous, but rather all succeed one another. If one were to ascribe such a succession to time itself, one would have to think yet another time in which this succession would be possible. All right, we ran into that argument in the notes above.
Yeah. Yeah. And we
I
just.
don't know what a modus is here.
Oh
I
what
know.
no,
is the
yeah, we were talking that was something that I was uh where does he talk about it? Let me get my hard copy out just so I don't like give everyone a seizure flipping between the PDF. He says it it was the thing where I had to like go to the notes to get a good like summary on basically. Um the modi of time. Yes, the three modi of time are persistent, succession, and simultaneity. Um, so that's what they're just different. They're different. I guess aspects of time.
Yeah, probably all relates back to the metaphysical exposition of time and transcendental aesthetic.
Yep. Cool. So that
All right.
is.
I'll keep going then. Only through that which persists does existence in different parts of the temporal series acquire a magnitude, which one calls duration. For in mere sequence alone, existence is always disappearing and beginning, and never has the least magnitude.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier, right? Where it's just, I think I was describing it more as like a binary thing as opposed to like, a spectrum. It's like things are just on or they're off, Um,
Yeah,
things just pop in
yeah.
and pop out.
Without that which persists, there is therefore no temporal relation. Now time cannot be perceived in its. Okay, here's where the transcendental stuff starts going. Now time cannot be perceived in itself. So like we have a persisting substance because of time. Nevertheless, time cannot be perceived in itself.
Yeah,
Thus, this
it can't be.
persisting thing.
I think perceived is the key word here. Like it can't be like perceived empirically.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
it is intuited purely.
yeah.
It would probably be
It
Kant's like
it
explanation.
has immediacy. Um, in addition to the ways it can be abstracted into the modi. Um, Now, time cannot be perceived for it in itself. Thus, this persisting thing in the appearances is the substratum of all time determination, consequently, also the condition of the possibility of all synthetic unity of perceptions, that is, of experience. And in this persisting thing, all existence and all change in time can only be regarded as a modus of the existence of that which lasts and persists. Therefore, in all appearances, that which persists is the object itself, that is, the substance, but everything that changes or that can change belongs only to the way in which this substance or substances exists, thus to their determinations. So we've gone back to judgment from the impossibility of perceiving time. Um,
Well, right, because
the Copernican
that's
revolution.
how time determinations are made. Like you said with your shadow example, right? It's we can judge how much time has passed based on the movement of the shadow in your example. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but we have
And
no.
there again, it's like there again, it's not that it's not like the outside source is like transcendent in like the Augustinian way where we are like completely blocked off from it. It's rather that it's like in relation with uh, certain metaphysical conditions um, that are subjective, and that like this is like getting towards the key to Kant's like normative part of the regulative, that you need to have a kind of rational faith in certain determinations that that is linked in the way we just read to humility, uh, to what you can't say about time and what's in time.
Um,
Okay.
no, I think you can be in Kant. You can be pretty confident about what's in time.
Yeah, yeah. but you have to concede that it's metaphysical.
No. Well,
I,
metaphysical in
I
what
would
sense?
say
It's
for him,
transcendental.
I
It's
don't know if I
transcendental.
agree with that.
What's that?
Go ahead. I would say like for him, you'd have to admit that it's metaphysical.
In what
Uh,
sense?
in the sense that the phenomena are determined, in the sense that uh, there's something that's no longer contingent or accidental, um, but necessary. Uh, what are you thinking?
I mean, I'm just thinking what he, if we're just going on like by Kant's own like what he set up already, and it's like you keep saying, it just goes back to the aesthetic, right? Time is an a priori intuition, so it's necessary, and it's intuited. Um, but I don't
Or
understand what you mean by metaphysical. Like it sounds like you're trying to like say something more than that by metaphysical, unless I'm just like misunderstanding.
um, I guess what I mean is that yeah, I guess that's just kind of like my overall view that finally in the analogies, like all the transcendental analytic has been explaining how metaphysics is possible, and then finally when he gets to the analogies, he's actually doing metaphysics based on how that would be possible. And before he's going to compare that and his, I mean, like derivation of these certain tautologies to other dogmatic forms, and then which happens in the dialect in the transcendental dialectic. Uh, so I mean, I don't. Do we have an aversion to metaphysics,
Oh
or
well, I mean, um, to be honest, it's not something I've thought about like myself too much. I kind of just am interested in like hearing like different philosophers' takes. I think Kant in this. I don't think Kant's doing metaphysics here. I think he's. I think he's. I mean, unless it's like a new restricted metaphysics like that like you're by what you mean by metaphysics. It's like
uh,
what he's doing is explaining experience, right? The synthetic unity, how how things are applied in the synthetic unity, right? um, um, Using the understanding. And I think where Kant really gets metaphysical, uh, and like addresses metaphysics, at least like as it was in his time, is like you said, Ken, in the dialectic, where he applies it outside of the realm of the understanding and he goes to reason. Right? When we start following this chain of like conditioning and being like, yo, this goes outside of the understanding. We need things that go beyond the understanding to explain. But time is not one of those things. Um, in Kant, anyway, it's an intuition.
yeah, I guess I'm kind of jumping the gun on Kant being an empiricist in this section. But it's hard not to when he's talking about a persisting, durable substance. Um,
Well, he is
like
being. This whole thing is going to be. This whole section is going to be him being an empiricist because he's explaining how it. This is the explanation of empirical like experience.
determinations,
Yeah, exactly.
insofar as they're possible.
Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, if you're gonna have empirical experience, this is how empirical experience works. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's his gist. So I think he's like, yeah, almost bound to be an empiricist just by virtue of like this part of the project. But I
But
don't.
he's being very careful not to be a dogmatist at the same time. Uh,
In
so
what sense? I mean, yeah, he's being critical. He's using the limitations of the aesthetic
mhm.
and of the categories as we as we were covered previously to talk about um, experience. And I think maybe why metaphysics is getting brought up is because he's using substance, but I don't think he's like using that in a metaphysical way. He's using that in a categorical way.
Yeah, good.
Cool. Is that the
I think we can yeah, no, it's good. I think we can keep moving.
cool? Does anyone want to read this next paragraph? Does anybody else have any questions as well? Ken and I have been taking up the
Yeah, for
microphone.
real.
I do have questions, but I will ask them later. I have them written down.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, if any of them pertain to what we were just talking about or the paragraph Kent read, definitely let us know now because this is a YouTube thing. So this is I like to get the conversation and stuff, and hopefully, you know.
Yeah. This it was just more about, I guess, what's the difference between and actually, I think this was earlier. You mentioned a constitutive and regulatory versus regulatory
Oh, yeah,
things.
a constitutive versus a regulative principle. Yeah, a
Yeah.
constitutive principle says that like things must, it's almost in the name. It's like things are this way, right? Things are constituted in this way, you could say, which is also to say that things like literally are this way, um, at all, universally at all times. Um, Regulative principle just is a regulation. It's like if you are going to do something, it has to follow these rules, right? It's like think about like the rules and regulations, right? When you're like about to like I don't know go on a ride at Six Flags or something, right? There are a bunch of like rules and regulations that says okay, if this is going to like be possible, right? At least bringing the philosophical language into it, it needs to be done in this way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you like actually go on the ride, right? And if you're failing to meet the regulative principle, then you actually don't. But constitutive principles are at least as I understand, they are like literally just how things work. Like there's no like contingency. There's
Well,
no like possibility. Um,
You can relate the that distinction to the like controversies that were going on over God at the time that Kant was writing, which is like if God knows all and is all powerful, then all things would be constitutive, and like Kant is, as Heine says, cutting off the head of God by
yeah,
saying that we have to have this like we have to be in this space where there isn't certainty, where there's only the form of our judgment that we can't always like express outright, and that's just how we act. That's just how we are in the world. And those are the regulative, I guess. Like I guess like Kant would wants to get to a point where you could explain like why you're doing any particular thing that you're doing, but he knows you can't do that for everything, and yet that this is sort of like his technique of like I guess like keeping it pushing in terms of what you can't know, um, and what you can in philosophy, um, and moral life, I guess,
is
because that's going to be a big part of the project.
yeah, exactly.
how
Like
does
in this section, this is literally about empirical experience. So like as you know, what can a lot of people will try to sell you stuff where it's like oh this is like a new technique that's going to allow us to see the future of like whatever like project or endeavor or phenomenon and this like Kent said this is Kant's big pushback against that. This is saying like, no, there are limits to what can be like not just known, but like cognized. We cannot cognize a future. Like, you know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like which I think I'm saying that because I think that goes further than just like, oh, like the future, we don't know what's gonna happen. Like this is big for like freedom, I think, and like contingent, like phenomenal reality at least is not this like fixed sort of um, thing. It's a very it's contingent. There's no telling. We can predict, right? We can make scientific like predictions, but there's like no telling like what it's like the Hume thing, right? It's like, or like the sun has been rising, but like will it rise tomorrow? It's like, well, we can make predictions about it and stuff, but we can't like have this sort of certainty that I think people want, that they long
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess in that is anything constitutive? Constitutive?
Constitutive. Well, yeah. That the half of the axioms and the um, what is it?
I mean,
Anticipations.
so much of our sense faculty is constitutive. So like
The question is, why can't those
that
things change?
sorry.
I guess my question is, why can't those things just also change like anything else in experience?
Um
Merely because they haven't and never have, or another reason?
because I think for Kant, because they would fall into contradiction, because you would be saying two things about, say, space or time that that can't be said at the same time, that negate one another. I think that's kind of his strategy. Um,
Or you wouldn't be able to say anything at all because you wouldn't be doing something that constitutes human. You would
yeah,
create.
exactly.
Yeah, because you wouldn't, or at least you wouldn't be able to do something that we would call saying because it would be doing something functionally noumenal, I guess, because it just wouldn't be. Maybe not noumenal is the word to describe it, but
Well, this is where the
uh,
like nitty gritty details of phenomenology are like maybe make some good additions um, uh, to this, uh, where like let's be more open minded about time consciousness, uh, and less objective. I mean, for even though like ultimately the subjective is super important for Kant, his whole his um his objectivity still kind of like his philosophy still kind of screams objectivity.
yeah,
Um, uh, which yeah, but I mean in this really like he's not trying to do anything big in this section. I'm convinced. Substance. I mean, he does admit later that like most people who are philosophers are not like presuppose the persistence as a substratum of all change in the appearances. Like this is not like groundbreaking. We already have rational faith about this. Um, it just he's showing us why we have to in a different way
Yeah,
than
and he's changing the scope, right? He's like you said
yeah.
earlier, Ken. He's not being dogmatic. He's not being a Spinozist. He's not saying like, okay, well, you know, um, yeah, he's not doing like the ethics, right? Or what Leibniz was doing either. He's not being a rationalist. He's saying this has to exist within the confines of an understanding that is looking to like unify an experience, which is where this
that's it.
like a lot of the empirical empiricism core stuff happens. um
So yeah, so if
um
an experience is not trying to do that, then that's what makes it regulatory because this wouldn't be a
well, that's
this wouldn't
what
get on.
makes it that's what makes it a category for Kant. This is just
Yeah.
categories are made to be applied to the understanding. Now how they are applied, and this goes back to your more original question, Harrison. He calls them, mathematical principles, which are the constitutive ones, and the dynamical, which are the regulatory. And he says earlier in around the B201 A162 that um, soon it will be shown that as far as the evidence as well as the a priori determination of appearances according to the categories of magnitude and quality are concerned, their principles are importantly distinct from those of the two others. While the former are capable of an intuitive certainty, the latter are capable of only a discursive certainty, though in both cases they are capable of a complete certainty. So, I think what's really important here is to address that intuitive certainty. What makes something like, the axioms and the anticipations. Those are the mathematical ones. Those are grounded in intuition, right? In pure a priori intuition.
Yeah.
So Harrison, the reason those can't change is because the only way they would change is if you got rid of space and time, which for Kant, that's just like not something you can do.
Yeah, I see. You'd have to fundamentally change geometry, and I see. Okay.
Yeah,
You'd
you'd
have to be a different kind of intuitor. You'd have to be a different kind of thing that senses to not have space and time.
Yeah. Wait. So I see, but you can. So the mathematical ones derive from that, but so then the dynamic ones are for instance, like for substance, that would kind of fall under like unification, right? Like everything is united under one thing.
Well, that's actually what all the categories serve to do. All the categories serve to unify in different ways.
They serve to unify. Okay.
That's what all the categories do. Yeah, that's what everything that we're going to talk about, no matter whether they're mathematical or dynamical, they're all principles for how the understanding is applied objectively. And what the understanding does fundamentally, this was like at the beginning of the transcendental logic section. This is how it opened up, if I remember correctly. It introduces the understanding as a faculty for unification.
Faculty of what?
Unification of unifying things, of unifying.
So then,
yeah.
So then, in that sense, can we help but to not unify things, or can we help but to unify things? I guess.
Well, yeah.
Like,
For Kant, for Kant, no, right? For Kant, no. This is.
Well, then, wouldn't that make it constitutive? And it's like you can't. I guess he's kind of.
Right, but
assuming...
so the constitutive things are saying you must unify things in this way. Regulative are saying you could unify things in this way.
You could. Right. And by unify, because I mean, like substance is like it seems like a kind of literal, like when I say the word unify, I mean like the way where it's like everything is one thing kind of thing. Well, maybe actually no, I'm thinking of Spinoza's substance.
No, that's good because that's good
what
though.
I spend the most time with.
It's within the realm of experience, basically. You're right though. Just if you qualify it with in the realm of experience, everything is everything is one experience. That's what Kant.
Yeah, and
that's what Kant.
And that's Spinoza's substance, and so then
no. That's Kant's unity.
Well, I know it's not. I know it's not. It's not Spinoza's substance, but they are. I guess part of me can't help, I guess, drawing parallel in the sense of like we are looking at like well, yes, because Kant thinks there are things outside of experience, right? Or at least he thinks there could be. And like if that's
he says that we can know, but not
we receive things, right?
Well,
if we receive them.
Well, receiving is so all of what we're talking about now is technically outside of experience, in the sense of like it's not going to be like empirical.
So his experience, when he uses the word experience, does he mean empirical experience?
Yeah.
I see. So he doesn't mean things that we like would come out like he doesn't mean like pure concepts. If there is such a
No.
thing, I don't even know what I mean by that necessarily.
Well, yeah, he
but-
thinks they're pure concepts that are used for experience, but you don't like experience them, right? Just
don't
like he's saying, you
experience-
don't perceive time, right? He was saying that earlier. You don't,
I
nor
see.
do you experience time in any
You
like
don't
direct way.
So you don't experience unification; you experience manifestation of unification.
Yeah,
I see.
which is
Um,
experience, empirical
And
experience.
then and self-knowledge, which is like
And
the
self-knowledge.
consciousness that you know that like at
then-
at the same time as you understand the limits of your understanding and
So
your
then
and the kind of sense faculty that you give your thinking, that you
So
give
then-
to your thinking.
So then, for a mathematical constitutive, would that be something like the all the different kinds of triangles, or would that be more like the rules of geometry, like Euclidean geometry, or like what makes something?
Yeah,
Like, I
well,
could- I
that's
could-
that was earlier in the So we could, I think maybe we can cut this
We
a
could.
little short, just because this is something that was directly answered. Like that's what the previous two
Yes.
sections were about. So, but hopefully
bad,
that
my
helps
bad.
clarify things, and I'd be
Yes,
down
yes.
once we're like through with the recording and stuff to explore those with you. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think you're on the right track. Sorry to like, I
Yeah.
don't want to be a dick. I just
No, I get it. I get it.
this
Yeah,
is just to keep
I
it fresh.
have I'm eating dinner soon. Could we try to get to the end of the first analogy and then
Yeah.
next time
Let's
do
do
the
that. I
second
think
analogy?
a lot of what we said to knowing Kant is just gonna endure throughout. You know, like
Yeah.
pun intended.
It hopefully, like in his words, it'll actually somehow be clearer.
Yeah, I think with all this conversation and context, we're either gonna be like, okay, this is something that we've already wondered about, or it's or it'll be answered, or it'll just be a repetition. That's usually how it goes. Anyway, so where were we? Were we here? No, we were
What-
earlier, right?
Yeah, just like a little bit. You probably from now time cannot be perceived. Oh no, we did finish that paragraph.
Okay, so we
The
should.
way that substances exist and their determination. So start with I find.
Okay. Does anyone want to read this one? Okay, I'll read it. I find that at all times, not merely the philosopher, but even the common understanding has presupposed this persistence as a substratum of all change in appearances. Right, that's what we were just saying. And has also always accepted it as indubitable. Only the philosopher expresses himself somewhat more determinately in saying that in all alterations in the world, the substance remains and only the accidents change. But I nowhere find even the attempt at a proof of this so obviously synthetic proposition. Indeed, only rarely stands as it deserves to, but at the head of the pure and completely a priori laws of nature. In fact, the proposition that substance persists is tautological, for only this persistence is the ground for our application of the category of substance to appearance, and one should have proved that in all appearances there is something that persists. Of that which changes is nothing but the determination of its existence. But since such a proof can never be conducted dogmatically, i.e. from concepts, because it concerns synthetic a priori proposition, and it was never considered that such propositions are valid only in relation to possible experience, hence they can be proved only through a deduction of the possibility of the latter. It is no wonder that it has, to be sure, granted all experience, for one feels the need for it in empirical cognition, but has never been proved.
This is like an awesome takedown of neuroscience. It's like you're just showing me different things that exist. You're not telling me like the relationship and it to its meaning as somebody who possesses a mind or who can think. You're just showing me that a substance changes. Like, look at these brain scans. Like, it's there has to be more. But you could come up with so many examples of those who like don't put uh, uh, that don't consider substance as something that has to be brought out in a synthetic proposition, um, and yet is still treated as meaningful. Um, anyway, that's my little
Yeah,
tirade.
my thing is on the other end. It's a fucking takedown of dogmatic rationalism, right? It's saying we can't just come up with substance, like define it, but then just I mean, yeah, Kant says we feel like the need to an empirical cognition, but we it's never been, it hasn't, you don't prove it that way. That's sort of,
Yeah,
this is a big reason why Kant made this critique, because he does this for other things, too. But in this case, it's substance. People just kind of take a definition and then like define it, and then are like, yes, clearly this is the case with reality, and it's just like, okay, but you're only playing with words. You're not doing the synthetic thing of connecting the concept to time and space. You're not actually doing that. Um,
yeah. Could you keep going, Matt?
yeah, with the reading,
Mhm.
or like with my speech.
With with the reading, unless you had another
No, that was
argument.
it. That was it. I just was yeah, for sure. A philosopher was asked, "How much does the smoke weigh?" What the fuck? Oh,
Bruh.
Bruh. Bruh.
it's so fun. It's a funny question. He replied, "If you take away from the weight of the wood that was burnt, the weight of the ashes that are left over, you'll have the weight of the smoke." He thus assumed as incontrovertible that even in the fire, the matter substance never disappears, but only rather suffers an altercation in its form. Likewise, the proposition "nothing comes from nothing" uh, is only another consequence of the principle of persistence, or rather of the everlasting existence of the proper subject in the appearances. For if that in the appearance which one would call substance is to be the proper substratum of all time determination, then all existence in the past as well as in the future time must be able to be determined in it and it alone. Hence, we can grant as an appearance the name of substance only if we presuppose its existence at all time, which is not even perfectly expressed through the word persistence, since this pertains more to future time. Nevertheless, the inner necessity of persisting is inseparably connected with the necessity of always having existed, and the expression may therefore stand. Some Latin thing. Nothing comes out of nothing, and nothing can revert into nothing. Are two propositions which the ancients connected inseparably, and which are now sometimes separated only out of misunderstanding, because one imagines that they pertain to things in themselves, and that the former would be opposed to the dependence of the world on a supreme cause, even as far as its substance is concerned. But this worry is unnecessary, for here the issue is only appearances in the field of experience, as we know, the unity of which would never be possible if we were to allow new things, as far as their substance is concerned, to arise. For then everything would disappear that alone can represent the unity of time, namely the identity of the substratum, in which alone all things change, has its thoroughgoing unity. This persistence is therefore nothing more than the way in which we represent the existence of all things in appearance. So, I mean, that was a lot, but I think you can reduce that essentially to yes, persistence implies a sort of uh, eternity, but that eternity is limited to an eternity that can be understood in the context of a possible experience, which obviously is like, you know, dynamical, right? It's not constitutive. So
Mhm.
it's sort of hard to. Well, actually, it's impossible to sort of do what the ancients are doing. Um,
What is what does he mean by within a possible experience?
within a possible empirical experience, as we were describing it earlier.
Okay.
In this within a possible unity of
Right.
self-conscious
Okay.
experience. Yeah.
Can I keep going?
Yeah, if you want to read. Yep.
The determinations of a substance that are nothing other than particular ways for it to exist are called accidents. They are always real since they concern the existence of the substance. Negations are merely determinations that express the non-being of something in the substance. Now, if one ascribes a particular existence to this real in substance, for example, motion, as an accident of matter, then this existence is called inherence, in contrast to the existence of the substance, which is called subsistence. Yet many misinterpretations arise from this, and it is more precise and correct if one characterizes the accident only through the way in which the existence of a substance is positively determined. Nevertheless, thanks to the conditions of the logical use of our understanding, it is still unavoidable for us to abstract out, as it were, that which can change in the existence of a substance while the substance remains, and to consider it in relation to what is really persistent and fundamental. Thus, the category also stands under the title of relations, but more as their condition than as itself containing a relation. So inherence is like the activity of the understanding. Subsistence is the activity of sensibility. And between subsistence and adherence is a self-examination of certain conditions that can be in a strictly like conceptual dispute, and not but and because they can, that's what kind of shows that they're not things in themselves, that you have to go back and forth between sense and understanding is where the idealism lies. Now, on this persistence, there is also grounded a correction of the concept of alteration. Arising and perishing are not alterations of that which arises or perishes. Alteration is a way of existing that succeeds another way of existing of the very same object. Hence, everything that is altered is lasting, and only its state changes. So here's like the wax example.
Yep.
Thus, since this change concerns only the determinations that can cease or begin, we can say, in an expression that seems somewhat paradoxical, that only what persists, the substance, is altered, while that which is changeable does not suffer any alteration, but rather a change, since some determinations cease and others begin. Oh man. I don't know what to make of that conclusion.
I think it's just a really weird way of saying that what he's been saying, sort of this maybe not this whole time, but what he's already said previously. If you're gonna say something changes, there needs to be like something there that doesn't change. Because if that something changes, then it's something else, and then you're not talking about that thing changing anymore. You're just talking about something differently entirely.
Good. And I think we're gonna get that and get more clarification in the next paragraph.
Cool. Yeah.
Alteration can therefore be perceived only in substances, and arising or perishing per se cannot be a possible perception unless it concerns merely a determination of that which persists, for it is this very thing that persists that makes possible the representation of the transition from one state into another, and from non-being into being, which can therefore be empirically cognized only as changing determinations of that which lasts. If you assume that something simply began to be, then you would have to have a point of time in which it did not exist. But what would you attach to this, if not to that which already exists? For an empty time that would precede is not an object of perception. But if you connect this origination to things that existed antecedently, and which endured until that which arises, then the latter would be only a determination of the former, as that which persists. It is just the same with perishing, for this presupposes the empirical representation of a time at which there is no longer an appearance. Here, I'll just finish it out. Substance, and then maybe we can talk some more. Substances in appearance are the substrata of all time determinations. Yes, I'm convinced. The arising of some of them and the perishing of others would itself remove the sole condition of the empirical unity of time. And the appearances would then be related in two different ways, in which existence flowed side by side, which is absurd. For there is only one time, in which all different times must not be placed simultaneously, but only one after another. Persistence is accordingly a necessary condition under which alone appearances as things or objects are determinable in a possible experience. As to the empirical criterion of this necessary persistence, and with it of the substantiality of appearances, however, what follows will give us the opportunity to note what is necessary.
And there we have it. Then we will next time go on to the second analogy. So this has definitely been long enough. Oh my god, an hour 45 minutes. This might be the longest study session we've done in the series. So
we yeah. Even though it has to do with substance, it ended up not covering empiricism at all in the way I thought it would. But maybe next week, or maybe not.
yeah, we will see. Are there any final like thoughts before we get out of here?
No, that was pretty fire.
Agreed.
It's exactly how I describe the critique of pure reason at parties. Shit is fire, yo. Check this out.
So lit.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah, peace out,
Thanks.
Kent. Have a good dinner.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Just check out the
I feel like
Discord whenever you want to
something.
do something. Yeah, cool.
All right, cheers.
Peace out. Peace out.
Bye.
Peace out. Peace out.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
Kirk Harrison. All right, peace.
Yeah, Harrison. Before you ask your question, I'm gonna end off the recording by giving a Kantian wisdom of the day, in light of the tradition of the series. So sorry to keep you waiting, but Kantian wisdom of the day: don't bring don't subscribe. Hold on, wait, I gotta think of a way to say this. Don't talk about eternity of the existence of things, empirical things, outside of the realm of experience. Yeah, or at least of things in space. So, boom. Okay. That's my Kantian wisdom of the day. Does anybody else have a Kantian wisdom of the day? Any lessons they learned from this reading that they want to share?
No.
All right. God bless you all. We'll see you next time for the second analogy. We'll talk about causality. So if we talked about substance a lot, I'm sure causality, especially if Pat is here, we're going to have a lot to say about that. So, all right, we'll see you next time for that. Bye-bye.